What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another NFL Deep Dives episode where we're revealing my NFL power rankings heading into the 2017 season, talking Vegas odds, picking over-unders, playoff odds, all that good stuff, and then wrapping up by taking a deep look into the depth chart of each NFL team, talking about strengths and weaknesses, and maybe some positional battles heading into training camp, which is underway. I'm so pumped. And if you guys are liking these videos, this series, if you like this video specifically, do consider giving me a like. It does help me understand that I'm putting in my resources to this channel in the right ways. Anyway, we've got the Vikings coming in at 14th in my power rankings. It is a good bit higher than a lot of experts have them out there. I think NFL Network and ESPN have them at 22 and 21 respectively. So pretty optimistic outlook for me for this team. And really, it all comes back to the fact that this has been one of the best teams in the entire league over the last 2 years. If you remember, in 2015, this team actually took the division from the Green Bay Packers and were a missed Blair Walsh field goal away from beating the Seahawks in the playoffs. And then last year, they put together, 5 or 6 straight wins to start the season. Good wins on the road against the Titans and Panthers. They knocked off the Packers and the Giants. And a lot of people were actually picking the Vikings to win the Super Bowl last year, about a third way through the season. So to drop them all the way down to 20 seems pretty crazy. It's a very toxic reaction, in my opinion. So regardless, this team should be a damn good football team this year. They obviously have some question marks, which we'll go through in the depth chart, but we know this defense is going to be dominant. I always talk about the importance of an edge rush in the NFL, and the Vikings have one of the best in football, probably the best in the NFC, and a top 3 or 4 in the NFL. I think you could say Houston or Kansas City, but the Vikings definitely right there. We'll talk about those edge rushers in the depth chart section. But this defense is going to be a top 5 defense, not just a defense that will keep their offense in games, giving them the opportunity to win close games, but this is also a defense that will straight up win games for this team. Even when their offense can only score 13, 17 points, there's going to be a few games that this team wins when they hold their opponent to like 7 or 10 points, especially at home in that new stadium. One of the best home field advantages in football now. I think you also have to mention injuries. This team was very injury struck last year, especially in the second half. I will hold to the belief that returning healthy starters is the #1 sign of what they call positive regression, returning to the mean. And the mean for this team in the last 2 years has been very good. The question marks for this team are, however, surrounded around this offense. We'll go into this in depth in a minute, but you got the offensive line with really 3 new pieces there, some new talent. It's going to really revolve around that and, frankly, the health of Stefon Diggs. But it does seem if this group can stay healthy, it is a team that should at least be able to have an NFL offense, which is not what this team had for the second half of last year. It was a horizontal offense. It was arguably the worst offense in the NFL towards the end of the year. Maybe the Rams were worse, but I think you know what I'm saying. So Vegas has this team at 8.5 wins. I think it's a little low. I would take the over here. I think they have a very high floor because of this defense. I think the offense showed enough when healthy that they can have an upside in themselves. But I think they have a very high floor. I think 8 wins would be their floor. I'm picking them to go 9 or 10 wins. And again, I'll have a full prediction video when I finish these deep dive videos. So yeah, I think this team can definitely get over 8.5 wins. They have a pretty high upside as well. You know, plus 225 to win the division. It's not a bet I'm going to be taking. I like the Packers to win the division this year. But I wouldn't call you crazy if you like that bet. It's a good payout at over 2-1, and they did just win this division a year ago. And then 33-1 to win the Super Bowl. I think this team has Super Bowl aspirations. They have the coach and the defense to do it for sure, and it would be a home game. So if they could get to the Super Bowl, they probably would win. So I actually think 33-1 is a decent bet there for the Vikings. It's not a bet I'll be making, but regardless, a good payout there. So how about we go through this depth chart and talk about the holes and really what's going to have to come together here if this team wants to make the playoffs. Starting with the offense, you've got Sam Bradford. Obviously, a lot's going to revolve around him, as does pretty much every quarterback in the NFL. Bradford really seemed to take strides forward in advancing his career last year. Obviously, you have the completion percentage thing, led the NFL in completion percentage. I don't even think about that. However, it was a horizontal scheme. I think if things go right for this offense, his completion percentage should go way down to like the low 60s, because that means they're moving the ball vertically. I think Bradford actually showed some pretty good pocket awareness, extended some plays, and created some offense for himself despite having really a terrible offensive line. He didn't necessarily do it consistently from game to game, but he showed that it's in there. And with Teddy Bridgewater lurking, I think Bradford's going to continue to take strides. Is he the long-term answer for the Vikings? I don't have an answer for that. It's probably going to be tough with this current roster for them to get a high pick unless they trade it up. So I would think it's going to be Sam Bradford. You do have Teddy Bridgewater there. The horrific injury. Doctors were saying potentially career ending. He is recovering. It's hard to say how well he's out there throwing. I doubt we see him play this year. It would be a pretty incredible story if he did. The team declines his fifth-year option because of the injury, not because of his play. So he is set to be a free agent. I think the likely scenario is he actually re-signs. I think Sam Bradford has one more year after this year. So I think they could end up just paying both of these guys a decent chunk of money and just really taking a deep look after this season at who their long-term quarterback is. I still like Teddy Bridgewater, but part of what made him so great was that ability to extend plays with his mobility, and with that knee injury, how big of a hit does that have on him? I do think he's still a good pocket passer, but he doesn't have the natural arm talent that you would want out of a pure pocket passer. So Case Keenum should be the backup this year, a very solid backup. The Vikings would remain competitive, I think, with Case Keenum. Probably not a playoff team, but would still probably be looking at about 7 or 8 wins, even if Sam Bradford went down tomorrow. And then Taylor Heineke, an interesting guy to watch in the preseason, might make this roster if they end up just putting Teddy on the IR. If they do keep Teddy on the roster, Heineke probably on his way out. Might find his way on a different team, however. He's definitely a quarterback that has caught my eye in preseason games in the past. So then on to the running backs. It looks like Dalvin Cook seems to already have a grasp of the starting job. Our Lads does still list Latavius Murray. Frankly, if Murray couldn't get it done last year in what should have been the prime of his life physically, behind what was one of the best opportunities for a running back with that offensive line and just that offense in general, Latavius Murray, in my opinion, is a backup running back at this point. He's a guy that you could start in a pinch, but not a guy that you want to be your starter. When the Vikings signed him, they had no idea that they would be getting Dalvin Cook in the draft. It does not seem that Mike Zimmer likes Latavius Murray. Mike Zimmer despises lazy players, which is kind of what Latavius Murray's career screams. He has so much physical talent. How can you not accuse someone of being lazy when they haven't taken that next step? As far as Dalvin Cook goes, I do think he's the starter. I know fantasy perspective you want to hear. I like his long-term outlook, but until this offensive line can start to click and really get some new talent in there, I don't think he's going to rush for a lot of yards this year. This team was dead last in the NFL in yards per attempt last year. I like Dalvin Cook's talent, but I don't think as a rookie he is so transcendent that he could persevere over what should still be a pretty big liability in terms of run blocking. If he had a big year from a fantasy perspective, I think it would be in the screen game and really ripping off 5 or 6 receiving touchdowns. I'm probably staying away from him at his current ADP. From a dynasty perspective, I love the talent and I love the future outlook for this team that probably should swing towards the direction of being a run-first offense. And behind Dalvin Cook, you got Jerick McKinnon, should make the roster, but really just a swing back, third down back. Has had opportunities to be the number 1 guy and has not capitalized. And then Bishop Sankey might actually make this roster as the 4th running back. Then at receiver, you got Stefon Diggs, who I mentioned earlier. A lot of this team's success and how many games they can win is going to hinge around him staying healthy. he has not been able to stay healthy really throughout his playing career going back to college. It's the reason he fell to the 5th round, but he definitely showed that he is probably a top 10 receiver when healthy, and he is perfect for this offense because they can't really buy too much time for Bradford. Diggs makes his money on slant routes, comebacks, a lot of stuff that come off of 3-step drops from Bradford, getting rid of the ball quicker, and if they could use him in there, quick screen game as well. He's great with the ball in his hands. If he plays 16 games this year, I really don't have any doubts that the Vikings are going to win 10 or more games this year, but that's a big if. Stefon Diggs has never done that. So then you got Adam Thielen as the second receiver here, a really good number 2 guy. I think he compares very nicely to like Mohamed Sanu or Eric Decker. Doesn't necessarily take the top off the defense, but is a very solid possession receiver. Great hands. You could actually argue with some of the catches he made last year that he has some of the best hands in football. And then he also had that back shoulder chemistry with Sam Bradford, which offers a unique element to his game. So a good 1-2 punch there with Diggs and Thielen, but definitely room for someone else to emerge here. It's a very weak depth chart after those two. Jairus Wright is the slot guy, but he's, I don't know, the 25th best slot receiver in the NFL. Not really anything unique about Jairus Wright. And then Laquan Treadwell on a fast track to being a big bust. Already negative reports coming out of training camp around Treadwell with inability to create space. They say Sam Bradford technically overthrowing Treadwell, but on good throws where Treadwell just can't keep up with the ball. Really got to question his commitment to the game given that physical talent that he has. I loved Laquan Treadwell coming out. I guess I couldn't have predicted that he wouldn't try once he got here. And then you got Michael Floyd. He comes home to Minnesota. People said maybe he's going to get his head on his shoulders now that he's maybe around friends and family, but he gets caught drinking again. Suspended for the first 4 games. It's hard to project that he's gonna even get on the field, but with this depth chart, he could absolutely get on the field. And if things started to swing the other way and he started to realize what he could do at this level, there's definitely the opportunity for Michael Floyd to turn it around. Obviously has all of the physical tools to do that. I wouldn't project that it's gonna happen though. Then Rodney Adams, 5th round pick out of USF. Probably going to take Cordarrelle Patterson's role in the return game. Might get on the field. We'll see. I didn't really love his receiving ability from what I watched, but you never know. And you got Isaac Frichte, Stacy Coley, Moritz Boringer, some pretty poor depth behind them. Tight end, you got Kyle Rudolph. I tend to be a little lower on Rudolph. I think he is a very solid starting tight end with very low ceiling. I think he has average hands, average blocking, average route running. Not always easy to find a player that has all those tools, but he doesn't really have any plus traits in any direction. I think he's a little overrated as an athlete as well. Does not change directions well at all, and he has so many dumb drops, literally standing wide open in the end zone, just dropping the ball. So I think he's fine, but doesn't really open up the offense too much. You do have Bucky Hodges taken in the 6th round, a surprisingly highly rated rookie with the reveal of the rookie ratings. I want to say he was like a 72, a 6th round pick from this year. Definitely has that upside. You compare him to Jimmy Graham from a physical standpoint. Would not even be surprised either if Bucky Hodges became the 3rd wide receiver for this team. Doesn't really block a ton, but that 72 rating is going to come down for me. A guy that is going to have to show something before you make him what is a starting player in the NFL, which a 72 is in my roster. A guy to watch in the preseason, a guy with some serious upside, but a player that still is a 6th round pick, more likely than not, nothing will come of. So now moving on to the offensive line now. This is the number 1 talking point of the Vikings training camp. I think I'll start with the interior because the interior is actually pretty solid. You got Alex Boone and Joe Berger's going to move from center to right guard, so that should be good. And then technically Nick Easton listed as the starting center, but I think it's going to be Pat Elflein, 3rd round pick out of Ohio State. I want to say he's a 4-year starter from Ohio State. really can't go wrong there. So you should be pretty solid from the middle of the line, but it's seriously suspect on the outside. Riley Reiff gets paid a ton of money. The right tackle from Detroit comes over to play left tackle for the Vikings in what will be a bit of an experiment. Along with Stefon Diggs, Riley Reiff is going to be a pivot point for the Vikings in terms of how many games they can win. If he can be an average starting left tackle, and if Mike Remmers at right tackle can be an average starting right tackle, though I think a lot of Panthers fans would question that he can do that, then this offense is going to be serviceable at worst. They actually have some decent upside with Dalvin Cook there and Diggs and Thielen. This could be a top, 20 offense if the offensive line can be top 25. But again, a pretty big if. This offensive line was absolutely miserable last year, and it's probably going to have some inconsistencies this year, which will lead to inconsistencies on offense. Regardless, that's going to wrap up the look at this offense. Now moving on to the defensive side of the ball, which will be a lot more fun to talk about. It's a really, really good unit. It does have some holes, however, so let's get into that. As far as this edge rush goes, I think it is right there as the best pass rush in football. I think you could argue Houston and Kansas City, but probably the best edge rush in the NFC. I always talk about how important getting an edge rush is if you want to have a championship caliber defense. So you got Danielle Hunter now coming in to start over Brian Robison. Now Danielle Hunter had 11 sacks last year, but he didn't start. You know who also had 11 sacks? Khalil Mack. Now, granted, Khalil Mack's getting doubled on pretty much every play, and when he doesn't get doubled, he usually gets a sack. I'm just saying, Danielle Hunter is a serious breakout candidate. He is one of the freakiest athletes in the entire NFL. Just Google his name and look at a damn picture of the guy. He is physically impressive. And then Everson Griffin, another incredibly underappreciated player. He definitely comes up in my Madden rating. I want to say he's an 86 in the vanilla roster, and he's a 91 on mine. I think Everson Griffin is definitely one of the best pass rushers in football. He's got that size to speed combination. He will beat you around the edge, but he will also bull rush you. He also has some good finesse moves. He can whip out a good swim move or a spin move. So with Danielle Hunter breaking out, this could seriously be lethal combination off the edge. And then you rotate Brian Robison. That's not bad at all. It does drop off after him. They're going to want to find someone to replace Brian Robison long term. I don't think that person is currently on the roster. It's not Dayton Jones, who they signed from Green Bay. Stephen Weatherly, Ifeadi Odenigbo. I don't see either of those guys developing, but I guess you never know. And then you move inside where you got Linville Joseph, who is another severely underappreciated player. Comes over from the Giants a few years ago, and since then has really been one of the most physically intimidating players on the interior of any defensive line. You pair him with Tom Johnson, Shamar Stephen, who rotated in and out last year. A fine combination if it was just those two. You'd say that's definitely good enough to create one of the best front fours in football. But you do have Jaleel Johnson out of Iowa, who was drafted in the 4th round. Now, he could emerge as the starter next to Joseph, and if that's the case, this is going to be a terrifying front four. I like Jaleel Johnson's upside, especially in run defense. And then you got Will Sutton there. All these guys are going to take turns on the gas mask throughout the season. Moving on to the linebackers, it's probably the quote-unquote weakness of this defense, but you do have Eric Kendricks, who's very solid in the middle. Struggles to stay healthy at times, but probably a top 10 linebacker. And then the outside linebackers, definitely some question marks. It'll probably be Emmanuel Lemur, starting with the retirement of Chad Greenway. A Mike Zimmer guy coming over from Cincinnati should be able to play just fine, but not the long-term answer. And then I want to talk about Anthony Barr. Just to toot my own horn a little bit, I was very early to the Anthony Barr is overrated train. I think I had videos calling that before the year started, and I moved him down to 76 while he was, I think, like an 84 in the vanilla roster. Now, EA has caught up. Anthony Barr is now a 76, but I think I was about 3 months early to the party on that. Basically, what I see in Anthony Barr is a tweener, to use a basketball term. He was a pass rusher in college and is now just a stand-up linebacker who has virtually no idea what he's doing. I think people see him absolutely light up ball carriers in the open field, which is what he's really good at. He is a heat-seeking missile on the outside. Once he gets between the tackles, he is virtually useless in run defense. He doesn't really peel off blocks. His pad level is high. He seems to play like a contain edge rusher like he would have in college, but does not have those linebacker instincts in terms of run defense. And then in zone coverage, he is getting there, but he is out of position almost constantly. Teams will clearly target him as he plays hook zones. So a guy that I don't think actually fits into this team's long-term plans. Coach Zimmer was really, really hard on him. It does not seem that Zimmer is a big Anthony Barr fan. So he does have a couple years to continue to grow. This team's going to get plenty of time. And the reason you spend so much time talking about a guy like Anthony Barr is because he does have that crazy physical upside. He is such a fun Madden player, and this is a Madden channel, so I figured I'd talk about him a little bit there. But not really a good outlook going forward for Anthony Barr. And then you get to these corners. Now, Xavier Rhodes, I've been a little late to the party on Xavier Rhodes, I'll admit. I do still have my question marks. I think he's a little grabby. He was right up there in terms of pass interference calls. And you do have to question how good he would be outside of the Zimmer scheme, which is very cornerback friendly, especially with a pass rush like this. But you do see trends now with third or fourth year corners really over the last few years. Just look at guys like AJ Boye, Josh Norman. I think David Amerson for the Raiders is another great example of this. Cornerbacks that really come into their own in their third or fourth season. That is definitely what we saw from Xavier Rhodes. The trajectory definitely is going upwards. I'm still a little lower on Rhodes. He has been coming up and up. I have him as an 85. Madden has him as an 88. But I think give him 3 weeks to show me that he is an established corner for a second year in a row now, and he is going to be right there as a top 10 corner. Obviously just got paid as well, which helps his case. So I'm getting there with Rhodes. I still have slight hesitations to call him a top 10 corner, but a very good player nonetheless. And then you got Trey Waynes, who I thought actually played pretty well in stints last year. Still learning the position. He's a full-time starter now. Has some serious upside with that speed. I am going to predict that Waynes and Rhodes at the end of this season will be right there with Cromartie and Jenkins, Harris Jr. and Talib. The difference, however, these guys are both young. So this could be a dominant duo of corners going forward. And then you got Mckenzie Alexander playing in the nickel. Developed really slowly as a rookie, but Zimmer has pretty much proven that he doesn't like rookie corners. It seems he's going to play in the nickel now that Captain Munnerlyn is gone. That departure definitely seems to indicate that. They did not draft anyone else to play in the nickel, and it's not going to be Terrence Newman. So a really intriguing player there. If he can elevate to his potential, this cornerback depth chart is going to be incredible. And you pair it with this pass rush that's going to be dominant for the next 4 or 5 years, and you're really talking about a dynasty in terms of a defense. So Terrence Newman is there as sort of the dime matchup corner. They'll bring him in and out depending if they think he can handle it physically, but does still make plays when he's on the field. You got Marcus Sherrills, punt returner, and Jack Tacho Toko. Don't know how you say his last name. Don't know much about him as a player, but they do kind of have room for some young talent to come in the depth here, so keep an eye on these young guys here. Jabari Price as well. So then wrapping up with the safeties, Harrison Smith, one of the best free safeties, strong safeties, whatever he's playing that week. I think I'd say he's better in run defense than coverage, but excellent at both. And then you got Andrew Sendejo, a fine starting strong safety, but does Jaron Kearse take a step forward? Definitely struggled as a rookie, but I know a lot of Vikings fans that want him to become Cam Chancellor. Has almost an identical physical comp, a 7th round pick from last year. Definitely a position battle to keep your eye on. And then Anthony Harris and Anton Exum. So a really good outlook for this defense, a really good future outlook for this defense. The question obviously will become how good/bad is this offense going to be? Vikings fans, I want to hear from you. What are your expectations for the team this year? Do you think they'll be playing in the Super Bowl at US Bank Stadium? Or do you think they'll be watching it from home? Other NFL fans, is this too high? I know a lot of people have the Vikings as a bottom 10 team this year. If you think that's the case, why do you think that? So that's all I got. Cheers, everyone. Good day. Until next time.